The Cambrian period, which began around 540 million years ago, over twice the age of the dinosaurs, is widely known to have hosted a marvellous multiplicity of some of the most bizarre life forms our planet has ever seen. Yet when one looks beneath the weirdness, and there is a lot of weirdness, many bear echoes of familiarity, subtle parallels with creatures living and breathing today. And that is by no means a coincidence, for it was in the Cambrian that many of the major animal groups alive today saw their humble beginnings. The echinoderms, mollusks, arthropods, and the phylum that we ourselves belong to, the chordates, all first appear in the fossil record at around this time. Of those, the arthropods, then as they do now, comprised the majority of the animals around in the Cambrian, but they shared these ancient waters with other creatures that straddled the line between arthropods proper and their distant cousins. But before we go any further, I think it'd be prudent to give a little lesson on phylogeny, namely the concept of crown and stem groups, in order to pad this video's runtime, provide some context for terminology I'll be using later. The crown group goes back to the most recent common ancestor of all members of a given taxon alive today, and includes all descendants of said ancestor. The crown group arthropods are sometimes referred to as the Euarthropoda, the prefix "eu" meaning true. Meanwhile, the stem group encompasses any extinct lineages that are more closely related to the crown group than they are to the closest living relatives of the crown group. The closest living relatives of euarthropods are onychophorans and tardigrades. So stem arthropods comprise all extinct taxa that are phylogenetically closer to the Euarthropoda than they are to the onychophorans and tardigrades. The Cambrian hosted a multitude of these stem arthropods, and among them were some of the largest animals of their time. One group in particular that came to dominate the Cambrian seas were the Radiodonts. Even at a time when otherworldly forms were the prevailing norm, Radiodonts were on a whole different level of bizarre. They were perhaps the most diverse of all the stem arthropods, an incredibly varied group that displayed adaptations for a broad spectrum of ecologies. Some, like Anomalocaris, appear to have been swift, active predators of free-swimming, soft-bodied prey, while others, like Stanleycaris, were built more for life in the slow lane, trundling along lower in the water column and sifting the sediment for whatever morsels lay buried within. Manifold as they were, all Radiodonts had the same basic body plan. At the front was a pair of long, grasping appendages used to capture prey, and between them, beneath the head, was a most intriguing mouth. It was surrounded by a ring of hardened plates called sclerites, forming a circular apparatus dubbed the oral cone that resembled a slice of pineapple, at the centre of which were small, pointed teeth. It is these strange mouthparts that give the group its name. Radiodont means radial tooth. In addition to these features, all known Radiodonts possessed large, stalked compound eyes, and 2 or sometimes 4 rows of flaps running along the length of their body, that would have almost certainly been used for locomotion, propelling the animal by means of wave-like undulations. In contrast to euarthropods, Radiodonts were mostly soft-bodied animals, with only certain parts, mainly various regions of the head, being protected by armour. As such, many Radiodont fossils are fragmentary, consisting only of select portions of the body that possess a hard exoskeleton, and thus are more readily preserved. The raptorial appendages at the front are among the... oh yes, let me mime that for you. Are among the most frequently observed Radiodont fossils, and are often found in isolation, leaving the appearance of the animal at large a mystery. And that was exactly how the particular species that this video is focused on was discovered. In 2010, a fossil assemblage containing the incredibly well-preserved remains of an assortment of Cambrian... okay, think before you talk this time. organisms, was discovered near Stanley Glacier in British Columbia. Some of the fossilised animals were familiar faces, species like Anomalocaris canadensis, and another large radiodont called Herdia victoria. But there was something else there too. This image here depicts the frontal appendages of two different radiodonts preserved alongside one another. The one on the right belongs to Herdia, but the one on the left was something else entirely, a new species of radiodont that was subsequently named Stanleycaris hierapex, after the Stanley Glacier near which it was discovered. Since then, many more remains of Stanleycaris have been unearthed in the region, sometimes comprising multiple individuals, all preserved in very close proximity, indicating that the animals may have gathered en masse. For what reason? Well, possibly to molt, a proposal supported by the flexible deformation of certain typically rigid portions of the appendages, which could plausibly be attributed to the softening of the animal's exoskeletons during the molting process. While frontal appendages are the most abundant of the animal's remains, its mouthparts are occasionally preserved alongside them, and though there's only so much one can infer about an animal based on some detached graspy things and a mouth, even these fragmentary fossils could still provide some insight. Certain aspects of the anatomy of the appendages indicates that Stanleycaris belonged to a family of radiodonts known as the Herdiidae, the same family as the sympatric Herdia. One notable feature was the nature of the endites, which are the prominent spines protruding from the appendage's inner surface. In Stanleycaris, 5 of these endites were particularly long and blade-like, a key defining trait for Herdiids. Furthermore, the endite closest to the base of the appendage was inclined in a manner that parallels other Herdiid genera. Herdiids are one of 4 recognised radiodont families, and include a couple of the group's most notable record holders. Agirocassus spenmauli, a 2-metre-long giant that dwarfed all other radiodonts. And, okay, I'm definitely going to butcher this, Schindehans bartelsi, the youngest radiodont known. And though it was not apparent at the time, Stanleycaris was soon to be yet another medal on the Herdiid mantelpiece. In the years thenceforth, even more fossils of Stanleycaris have been uncovered. How many? Well, let's just say a recent study was able to examine 268 new specimens of the animal. And I'm not just talking about more detached mouthparts and grabby things either. The majority of these specimens were full-body fossils. This, of course, means that the complete appearance of the animal is no longer down to speculation, and Stanleycaris revealed itself to be one of the strangest members of an already bizarre group. Though the morphology of its appendages evinces a Herdiid affinity, the overall form of Stanleycaris was atypical for a Herdiid, many of which had large heads covered by an enormous plate of armour that, in some cases, took up over half the animal's length. Stanleycaris, meanwhile, had a smaller head, and lacked the expansive head shield typical of Herdiids, in addition to having an overall more streamlined build and proportionally larger flaps running along its flanks. The general shape of Stanleycaris resembled that of more quintessential radiodonts like Anomalocaris, which corresponds well with the animal's classification. Stanleycaris is regarded as the most basal known member of the Herdiidae, and its appearance can thus be reliably interpreted as an intermediate between the forms of typical non-Herdiid radiodonts and those of highly derived Herdiids like Titanocoris. It was also very small for a radiodont, with even the largest full-body specimens measuring less than 10 centimeters long, though some fragmentary remains scale up to suggest that the animal could have attained lengths of around 15 centimeters. But in terms of pure, unearthly weirdness, all these little quirks pale in comparison to one particular feature that these new, complete fossils revealed. Stanleycaris had 3 eyes. I don't know what in the name of Sauron's left testicle was going on in the Cambrian in order to generate a world that looks more and more like a parallel universe occupied by every kid's spore creations, but I'll be forever tormented by the fact that I'll never behold such creatures in the flesh. You know, being born in the wrong generation and all that. But being an absolute weirdo is not what makes Stanleycaris such a noteworthy animal. Far more valuable from an academic standpoint is how remarkably well preserved many of its remains are. It is, perhaps, the most completely known radiodont species discovered thus far. Radiodonts, as aforementioned, were somewhat closely related to modern arthropods, which in turn makes them ideal candidates to study when unravelling the mysteries of arthropod evolution. And this newfound trove of marvellously preserved Stanleycaris specimens provides novel insight into the potential origins of features now ubiquitous across euarthropods. Not only is the external appearance of Stanleycaris readily discernible from these fossils, many specimens also preserve the animal's internal anatomy to quite an astonishing degree, including its digestive tract and even parts of the nervous system, namely the brain. It was initially thought that the radiodont brain consisted of only one section, the protocerebrum. However, the neuroanatomy visible in Stanleycaris fossils suggests radiodonts possessed a bipartite brain, meaning it consisted of not one but two segments, the protocerebrum and the deutocerebrum. The euarthropods, meanwhile, all have a tripartite brain, comprising, you guessed it, three segments, the protocerebrum, deutocerebrum and tritocerebrum. Since radiodonts occupy a more basal phylogenetic position than euarthropods, it is now deemed likely that a bipartite brain was the forerunner to the tripartite brain present in all arthropods alive today. So Stanleycaris, in spite of its unimpressive size, has well and truly cemented itself into the Radiodont Hall of Fame, a three-eyed oddball whose secrets, locked in stone, persisted untarnished for hundreds of millions of years, as both exquisite windows into a bygone age, and a further piece in the puzzle of elucidating the evolutionary origin of the arthropods, the most abundant and diverse animals on the planet. If you'd like to learn about another herdiad radiodont that also contributed significantly to our understanding of arthropod evolution, then by all means take a look at this video about the giant filter-feeding Argyrocassus. And if you enjoy my content, then by all means subscribe. Thank you all for watching, and I shall see you at an indeterminate point in the near future. That sounded a lot better in my head.